Hello and welcome back to In Conversation With, the podcast series from the team behind the Global Cosmetics newsfeed. Today we're focusing on one of beauty industry's fastest emerging consumer groups, Gen Alpha. Although most Gen Alpha consumers are still children, their growing influence on beauty trends, family purchasing decisions, and future brand loyalty is already reshaping the cosmetics industry. From the rise of Sephora Teen and the growing concerns surrounding cosmetorexia to evolving expectations around product development, digital engagement, and sustainability, brands are entering uncharted territory. For manufacturers, brands, and retailers alike, success will depend on balancing innovation with responsibility while building trust with both young consumers and their parents. So how can the beauty industry engage Gen Alpha in a way that is predictive, protective, and planet positive? That's what we'll be exploring today. I'm delighted to be joined by Julia Wray, freelance journalist and former cosmetics business editor, bringing extensive knowledge of the global cosmetics industry and emerging consumer trends. Dr Tiina Meder, founder of Meder Beauty, offering a medical and scientific perspective on skin health and education and age-appropriate skincare, and Sam Farmer, founder of Sam Farmer Young Adult Skincare, whose brand has been developed specifically for young skin and the changing needs of younger consumers. Thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin with the consumer. Gen Alpha is entering the beauty category earlier than any previous generation, but they're also being influenced by social media, peer culture, and online creators in a way that we've never seen before. This presents exciting opportunities for the industry, but also raises important questions about education, responsibility, and well-being. Julia, from your perspective covering the global beauty industry, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities facing manufacturers, brands, and retailers serving Gen Alpha consumers in 2026?
Gosh, it's such an interesting generation, and there are so many nuances here. I think one of the main things that we have to keep in mind when we talk about Gen Alpha is that the oldest Gen Alphas are now 16 and the youngest are still in nursery. And obviously, this is a common issue, I think, when we talk about all generational banding. For example, I'm an older millennial, which means that technically I probably have more in common culturally in what I grew up with, Siobhan, with you, this is Gen Xer, than I do with many younger millennials. But this age difference, obviously, it becomes so prominent when you're talking about Gen Alpha at present, which span from people taking their GCSEs to people who are really just learning to talk. So I think we always have to have that in the back of our minds as a bit of a caveat when we talk about Gen Alpha as this homogeneous consumer group, or rather future consumer group in some cases. So what are the differences? I saw recently a 2025 survey by Numerator, which really highlighted this sort of maturity pivot among Gen Alpha with beauty. So obviously there's this journey where Gen Alpha behavior shifts from things like make bath time fun with bubbles and suds and fun packaging and something that won't make me cry when it gets my eyes to help me feel and smell confident. So obviously for the 0 to 5 category, there's this focus on gentleness, on fun packaging, and really it's the parents that are going to observe if a child likes to use a product or not and make that purchasing decision. Then you get to 6 to 10-year-olds where scent becomes this massive thing. And when you look at 11 to 14-year-olds, you've got scent, but you've also got effectiveness. So really, when you're looking at the older group, their purchasing decisions are really influenced in a way that's much more adult than it is compared with their younger Gen Alpha cohorts. That said, there are commonalities. So, for example, as a unit, Gen Alpha are so commercially confident compared with previous generations. PwC, they did a Gen Alpha survey this year, which revealed that these guys are super brand aware. And they also know exactly what they want. So a 7-year-old, for example, will know which brand of yogurt goes into the grocery cart and will be pointing and kicking up a fuss. An 11-year-old might add a lip gloss, for example, to their parents' online drugstore order. And according to the PwC, parents are mostly accepting of this. I can imagine there are examples where they're like, absolutely not to this brand for whatever reason, cost or suitability, but generally they're quite accepting. Interestingly, food and drink is the category where Gen Alpha most wants to spend their parents' money, but skincare and beauty ranks highly. So 34% are prioritizing spend on skincare and beauty, and this places it above tech, accessories, and electronics. So in many ways, this makes sense. Gen Alpha of all ages will see so many different brands in the food and drink sector throughout their entire day. They will see less in the skincare and personal care. And then again, fewer in the tech and accessories and electronic space. So it makes sense that there are areas where they're hyper brand aware and where they rank somewhere in the middle. But I do think it is interesting to note that our industry is one in which teens and children are invested. I think something that's going to be really interesting regarding this generation is its approach to sustainability. You mentioned sustainability then, and I couldn't resist jumping in on this. Mintel has definitely pulled up as a pointer that Gen Alpha is very aware of the consequences of climate inaction because it's going to affect them directly. It's not for my generation where it's hypothetical. It's a disaster movie however many years in the future. It really is quite tangible to them. And many prefer to use eco-friendly beauty products. But equally at the same time, this is a generation that couldn't wait to line up outside Pop Mart full of boo-boos. They want the in thing. And this is nothing new. I wanted Tamagotchis back in the day. But I saw a great LinkedIn think piece the other day. It was on Nido's, and it was from the CMO of Emco Beauty, Meredith Rojas. I never heard of a Nido, but apparently these like squishy stress relief toys, and they're selling out at this vast and frightening rate. And her take is that it doesn't matter about the toy or the product, whether it's a Labubu or a Nido or whatever. What Gen Alpha really want, what they're addicted to, is the hunt, the rarity, the bragging rights, and the flex. And again, this isn't necessarily new, but the scale is so much different to any other generation before it because of social media, what children are seeing on social media, and their desire to then show that they've got their hands on a Nido. It's not like the Stretch Armstrongs of whatever generation. It's not like the Tamagotchis of my generation. This is a whole nother kettle of fish because of the social media environment right now. But that might be changing. So let's see.
Indeed. And Dr. Tiina, as a dermatologist, what concerns are you seeing around younger consumers entering skincare so early? Where do you believe the industry has a responsibility to educate?
Oh, thank you so much for this question and for the invitation. And to be honest, I feel concerned as a doctor, as a mother, and as a brand founder from all three angles. My perspective is I'm worried. Because as a doctor, I'm concerned in children because they are still children. They're teenagers and many of them, they are literally in the nursery and they already feel worried about their appearance, which for me, it's not right because I prefer that children will be better educated about the role of the skin as the largest body organ. It is the organ like our liver and our kidney and lungs and everything else. So we should care about it, about its functionality, not about its appearance. Because it sounds ridiculous if we will say that our right kidney doesn't look so nice as our left kidney, but it is exactly what we say about the skin. I think it is too early to start to worry about the appearance at this age. It happens, and I don't know how to stop it. But I think that we should clearly define what is a healthy skin. And when the skin is unhealthy, for example, if the teenager or the child is developing some dermatosis or acne, we should be worried. And we should proceed for the treatment accordingly. And this treatment should be guided by international guideline and by best practice, not by influencers or TikTok trends. And in the same time, for me, I see how it can lead. I will not dare to say to mental health problems, despite that we see this worrying trend of the mental health discomfort amongst very young children and teenagers and the children still going into the primary school. And I think that's probably our beauty industry pressure. It plays some role here. Though this Sephora kid phenomenon is really worrying for me. And as a brand founder, it is a different situation because I am specializing in the development of skincare product for professional use. So our product are protected from uncontrolled use by children, except for the situation when children find our product on the bathroom shelf at home and just experiment with them. But I keep it in mind, and I really care about all types of ingredients we are using in our product. But our focus, it is microbiome science and the active longevity. So we think more strategically. We don't use some harsh ingredients. So even if 8 years old child apply one of few of our products on their skin, it will not harm them, at least. But still, we see more and more children in beauty clinics and in beauty salons. They are coming with their parents. And what I noticed as a new phenomenon and a new trend, then if earlier I started my practice in mid-90s, and at this time, mothers bring children to dermatologist or to the beautician, because mother being concerned about their skin, and children, they've been blissfully unconcerned most of the time, and they're like, I don't care. And now it is then the situation is reversed, because not only children ask their mother to bring them to the beauty clinic, we see now how children mother to visit aesthetic doctors to do something about their faces, because they concern them, they mother develop wrinkles. So I'm not sure how we should react to this. So it's still such a fresh territory. It's absolutely tabula rasa. So we're all in this boat together, trying to develop some strategy, right? So, but altogether, I'm more concerned than I have some ready-to-go solutions.
And Sam, your entire brand has been built around younger consumers. How are their expectations changing, and what opportunities do you see for brand developing products specifically for this generation?
This is a really complex area. I only deal with adolescent puberty. When you hit puberty, hormones in your body start producing excess oil and you start having body odor, you have greasy skin, oily hair, your feet sometimes smell, you're going to get spots. That is the change that I deal with. I don't deal with pre-teens in terms of pre-pubescence. I have quite strong opinions about brands that focus in on that and develop products that perhaps I would say are completely unnecessary. And I think that fosters an inappropriate attachment to cosmetic products. But on the other hand, we need to be able to teach young people in a very short space of time, from say 11 to 12 for girls, 12 to 13 for boys. That's when puberty starts. And literally 5 years later, they're spat out as adults. And they need to know how to look after themselves, and they need to know how to clean themselves and feel good about themselves. What I would say is that teenagers are the same. As Julia said, this banding of age groups it's just a marketing thing. I don't buy into it. I don't like it. It's inappropriate. It's useless, really, because teenagers today are exactly the same as teenagers thousands of years ago. They still fall in love. They still have spots. They still get angry. They're going through emotional changes. Their brain develops until your early 20s. So human physiology hasn't changed. So this banding of generations is confusing, I think. The other thing I would say, so I'm banging on about teenagers, but you need to understand the physiological changes that teenagers are going through, their emotional changes, as well as their brain development, if you want to understand how they use our products. Because when I was a teenager, when I was 12, 13, that's at the point where your brain, the risk part of your brain, is underdeveloped. So you're going to go to the furthest extreme. And in my day, that was drinking cider and smoking cigarettes outside a village hall at 12. Now, of course, in this day and age, if you're interested in skincare, you're going to go to the most extreme skincare. So you're going to try and get some retinol at that age. I mean, you're going to go to the extreme in whatever you're interested in that particular age. So I think that's where the inappropriateness of skincare has come into it. I suppose I'm a big believer in you need to cleanse your skin. You need to moisturize your skin. You need to use SPF and a deodorant if you've got body odor and clean your feet. Literally, it's as basic as that when you're a young teenager. And excess products, I think, are perhaps inappropriate unless you have a breakout, and then we have hydrocolloid patches or salicylic gel treatments or things like that. But I'm always about the simpler, the better, because really, as an industry, shouldn't be telling young people how to behave or who they should be. They need to find that out for themselves. We need to make it as simple as possible so they can just focus on getting through the day. They just don't want to smell at school. And if they get a spot, they want to be able to deal with it. On a basic level, I think that's as far as it goes.
Technology is transforming every stage of the beauty journey, from product development and social commerce to AI-powered diagnostics and personal recommendations. But younger consumers are also the first generation to grow up with these technologies as part of everyday life. Julia, how is technology changing the way Gen Alpha discovers and interacts with beauty brands?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, these are the first guys to have never known a world without touchscreens, without social media, without AI. And obviously this is shaping their education. It's shaping the way they interact with each other and with us or with older generations in the beauty industry. It's shaping their consumer habits too. So apparently 89% of 13 to 14-year-olds have their own smartphone, and 38% of 13 to 14-year-olds use AI tools just for funsies. And again, even for the little ones, many parents are using tech devices almost as these crisis management tools for even toddler-aged Gen Alphas. And I'm not judging. I've seen what kids can be like. I have nieces and nephews. But the upshot of this is that they are all super digitally aware. But I think we've got to remember as well, their parents are predominantly millennials, right? And millennials are relatively digitally savvy. One of the things that keeps coming up, and I do agree with this, is that the fundamentals of being a teenager or being a tween, as it were, are fairly consistent from generation to generation. However, I do think that when, for example, I was a teenager, my parents barely knew how to send an email. Millennials growing up were doing all sorts online that their parents would have been completely unaware of. So I do think that regardless of the platform, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, whether it's Roblox or something that doesn't exist yet, which might rise up, whatever rises up to rival these platforms, fundamentally, I think this generation's guardians are going to understand a little bit more about social media and the landscape. So the opportunities they can bring, the positive points, but also definitely the dangers presented by the kinds of platforms that children will use to discover and engage with the outside world. Interestingly, at the moment, the big boy is YouTube. So again, this is a PwC survey I'm citing here, but it put usage among 10 to 12-year-olds at 74%, which is massive. But again, for millennial parents, it's not their first YouTube rodeo. We grew up using YouTube. I think the wild cards at the moment, as we stand, is AI. I'm aware, because I've got friends in this sector, that youth education stakeholders, they are looking into teaching young people optimized and responsible AI usage. So with things like critical thinking, source reliability, plagiarism, all of these things. So again, I'm not sure to what extent these are in the curriculum, but ideally, we will wind up with a generation who are hopefully unafraid of AI and who can use it as a tool, but crucially not as a crutch. And interestingly, unlike Gen Z, who do rightfully exhibit quite a lot of concern over things like job scarcity as a result of AI, Gen Alpha apparently don't view AI as this job killer that Gen Z do. They see it as this space that requires newer and tech-enabled skill sets, which they are primed to learn. So I think there is a positivity there, which is maybe absent in the generation above. And for our industry specifically, again, Mintel's research found that a third of US 12 to 14-year-olds, they're already using augmented reality in their beauty purchasing journey. So I think it's really interesting that all of these investments that we've seen, all of these joint ventures that these beauty giants have been making in recent years to this effect, they are really going to come to the fore and flourish, I think, as this generation comes of age.
Dr. Tiina, what role do you see technology playing in improving skincare education, skin analysis, and engaging healthier routines for younger consumers?
It is really interesting question about the technology. And for me, the first place, it is a question about the access to technology, which is quite different in different areas around the world. Because when you are speaking about the generation of millennials who are now mostly the parents of Generation X, it is quite for the United Kingdom, but not for all countries around the world. And even in the UK, the age of getting the first child is dramatically changed in the last few decades. So there are a lot of millennial mothers, but also that's a huge percentage of Gen X mothers or Generation Alpha children. I think in the US, it's a little bit differently because there are a lot of states, especially red states, when the mother age is significantly lower. So there, that's probably not 100%, but majority of mothers are millennials. But in the UK and the European country, I think that's very much split, if not half by half, but quite significantly. And also it creates a different approach to the access of the technology because parents, they are more easygoing with technology, as they can see. And the Generation X parents, they have more bias, as I can say, I am from Generation X. And also this access to technology probably changed how children see technology in the beauty industry as well. And as much as I can see what I see in our professional niche of the beauty industry, then children, they're very keen and very curious about technology, especially about the diagnostic technology. But what we see, especially with the visual diagnostic, which is largely available now in the department stores and online platforms, that's this age prediction based on the visual diagnostic, which can be largely faulted. And it is a well-known fact, and even to get the proper age to get an access to some prohibited items like buying alcohol, we still need a human expertise because visual diagnostic, it's not developed well enough. And children, they're trying to get through this AI diagnostic about their face, about their skin and appearance. And they're coming back like, oh my God, I was diagnosed. I'm 29 years old. I'm aging. Give me retinol. And I think it's quite dangerous, and probably we should think about it, introducing these AI tools for large public. And maybe it should be added some disclaimer. Then it is not exactly right for people who are younger than 21, at least. Also, AI diagnostic is based on the algorithm. And I don't think that we have enough of data about children and teenagers' skin introduced to the AI tools. So when this Generation Alpha, is using these AI tools, they very often they have some fault of response which can add to their concerns. And another thing is their devices, because they're technology as well. And also in the last years, we see a lot of harm done by devices which can be easily bought in the department store, on the online platforms, like this Clarisonic brush, which harmed a lot of teenager skin because it's promoted like something which helped to get rid of acne, get rid of comedones, but it's not clearly mentioned that it can be harmful, it can be aggressive and traumatizing. Now we have these home gadgets with microcurrent therapy, with LED therapy, with even laser. I've seen in some Asiatic countries the cold plasma devices, which are possible to buy online. So I think we should think about it. We should keep it in mind and try to get technology to develop safer technology for children and teenagers.
So true about the algorithm doesn't have enough skincare. I've never thought about it that way, but that's very interesting. Sam, how can brands use technology to build trust and engagement with Gen Alpha without encouraging unhealthy beauty behaviors?
That's the question, isn't it? And unfortunately, I don't think that works brilliantly on the channels that we have with young people. Because of the way that the algorithms work, it has to be this product's dangerous. This ingredient is bad for you. The top 5 products you must not be using. It's always a negative, and they get the traction, and that gets the message across. When you put out an educational piece and you tell them what is working and what's useful, and they're just not interested in that. They're interested in the latest trend, the latest, these young people, influencers getting their own brands, and then TikTok get on board. Everyone can make money. And I'm sounding very cynical, but this is the way I see it. And then suddenly TikTok get the effort behind it and they can sell £1 million worth of product in an afternoon. But the only reason why they're doing that is TikTok want more businesses to sell on TikTok. So that's an advertisement for them. And of course, if you've got those sorts of capabilities and resources behind your brand, of course, you're going to sell products like that. But then you don't hear of them again. Then there's another product the following year. So this is very short term, and businesses they're not sentient things. They don't care about young people. They don't care about their skin. What they care about is money. So it comes from the brand founder, and it comes from education of the brand founder. If you've just got a business idea and you want to make money, this is where the problem starts. I really speak to the parents because it's usually once they've tried the trendy products or they bought something on Amazon or they're using too many products and they've agitated their skin barrier, then they start to get redness, soreness, breakouts. And then, of course, where do we go? We go to the sort of the basic products, but the products that are tried and tested. And I've been in this market. I came into the adolescent market 14 years ago, and that's all I've ever done. So I think it's difficult. I haven't really seen it done properly because young people don't really want to hear from middle-aged blokes about what products they should be using. But when they get a problem, then you may have their ear, and it's usually the parents' ear. So I think it's really difficult. I think it's very complicated. And I do have young people writing emails to me, but they've only come to me, they've only come to my brand through either their parents saying, have you seen this or looked at that? Or they've read something that I've written in a magazine, or they've seen the products on television by somebody who's recommending them. So it's really tricky if somebody can work out how to speak to that generation. But then I'd say it's difficult as a brand owner to talk to under 18. So you have to be very careful and responsible with that. Yeah, so it's really difficult, basically, is what I'm saying. It's really difficult.
And perhaps no area has generated more discussion than the products themselves. As more brands develop ranges specifically for younger customers, expectation around formulation, ingredient selection, and product claims continue to evolve. How do manufacturers create products that are effective without encouraging unnecessary skincare routines? And how do brands balance innovation with age-appropriate education? Julia, what product trends are defining the Gen Alpha beauty market in 2026?
So I think when it comes to the brands that we are seeing, which seem to be proving popular with Gen Alpha at the moment, you've got this category, which I would personally consider as being really targeted more at Gen Z, but which is obviously garnering the attention of Gen Alpha, for better or for worse. So I would say that a brand like Days Beauty, for example, is straddling those two generations at the moment. If we're looking at older Gen Alpha, it's got brightly colored tactile packaging. You've got flower shapes, swirl whipped cream shapes. It's quite accessibly priced, popular on TikTok. And I think it habits that interesting spot between the two. You've got other brands that I would say probably do that as well. Glow Hub, Gen C, Bubble. In the hair care space, you've got Being. But then you do have what I would consider to be specifically Gen Alpha brands. So you have Ever Eden that sells hair care, basic skincare, and the packaging has these kind of cute little winky faces on it. It feels a little bit like a more sophisticated version for tweens of those matey bottles that you used to get back in the day, and I think you still can. It's not courting Gen Z in any way. It's really focused on Gen Alpha. I would say that Indu, which is also relatively new, is not interested in Gen Z either, or at least anyone really over the age of 18. They're purely focused on teenagers. And I think that they intend, much like Sam's brand, to remain for a teen audience as that Gen Alpha progresses and passes through and Gen Beta teens and tweens come into the mix. We've got to make a differentiation here as well. I think there's a purity in going, we are a brand for teens. We are going to have quite simple, maybe even gender neutral packaging. We are going to have formulations that work. We know they work. We know they do the job. We've been targeting younger millennials when they were in their teens, and now we're targeting Gen Alpha as they go through their teens, and we will continue to target that group. Or are you a Gen Alpha brand that is marketed very specifically towards this generation? And that can get you in a little bit of a snafu. We've seen it with brands, especially targeting, this is more of a future thing maybe, but in 10 years' time, when Gen Alpha are the tastemakers, when everything that Gen Z does is hopelessly uncool, and Gen Alpha are the tastemakers, whatever it is that typifies them. We've seen it with Millennial Pink. We've seen it with this sort of Gen Z green, everything pebble shaped. Eventually, that's quite cool at the moment, eventually that will phase out. So do you define or chase the trend? Or do you go, okay, this is my niche and I'm going to make less obviously targeted at that generation, but it's going to be targeted at teens, or it's going to be targeted at 5 or 6 year olds, if, for example, it's a bubble bath brand. So sorry, that's a bit of a digression. But I think also it's interesting. I think a lot of the issues surrounding Tina brought up Sephora Kids, that snafu that happened a few years ago. I think some of that has stemmed from that thing where as a tween or a young teen, you tend to want to do what older teens and maybe college-aged adults are doing. So, for example, when I was 12, I wanted to read Just 17 magazine. But when I turned 17, by that stage, I was reading Cosmo, for example, which it is a pattern and it hasn't changed. And I think for this reason, brands that target 20-somethings and 30-somethings, they really need to do their research when it comes to the content creator collaborations that they are working on to know if their audience is contemporary to that influencer, or whether it is more aspirational and it is made up of, 10 to 15-year-olds who are following a sort of big sister-like figure, which can happen. We've seen it happen. So I think brands need to be very careful there as well. Or they need to ensure that the products are 100% fine for younger consumers to use in terms of ingredient messaging and so forth, and where it is not to be incredibly explicit about what it is and why, that education aspect as well. But as Sam mentioned, that is difficult. There are certain things nobody really likes to be lectured at. So I think it's just really breaking it down and making it really obvious why. I guess this is a bit of a kind of stray off, but I think if you're explaining to a 10-year-old that hasn't yet started menstruation that their big sister might be using a tampon and their mother might be using a tampon and their favorite influencer probably is, but they shouldn't because they do not need it fundamentally. That's a bit of a kind of digression there, but fundamentally, if somebody doesn't need something, if you sit down and explain why they don't need it, then that might come through. But again, nobody likes to be lectured. So it is a difficult area. Again, Sam mentioned that we're starting to see maybe some young Gen Alpha founders themselves get involved. I don't know where I really stand up. So we've got Salish Matter. She's a 16-year-old media personality. Her skincare line is called Sincerely Yours. It launched last year in Sephora. Last year, again, Yes Day by 13-year-old Coco Randerson launched. It was created with Ron Robinson, who's behind Road, and its positioning is this science-backed, teen-suitable and community-sourced approach to skincare. And then you've got a very new launch, Stella Beauty Co. And this is a spin-off from the class project of a then 9-year-old called Stella Desario. She's now 12. And again, I think this is interesting because it does have this wholesome protection and cleansing for sporty girls vibe. And I think all of these new Gen Alpha founded brands definitely are towing a line with regards to products which are suitable for young skins and they have a wholesome quality. It's like having a child movie star. You kind of go, are they okay? Is this okay? I think they have to have a wholesome quality because they almost have to be batting against maybe that assumption that we think of when we think about very young children really entering the workspace much younger than most children would.
And Dr. Tiina, from a clinical perspective, what should manufacturers consider when developing products for younger skin?
It is such a challenge because you should consider very controversial things. And there, on one side, you need young people to love these products. So they should be cool, sensoric should be different, very modern, pleasant, playful, probably. Young people, they love colors. They love perfumes. They love something which look different. But from the dermatologist point of view, and me being cosmetic safety expert, I am this boring person who insists on cosmetic product skincare should be safe. So colorants, potential allergens, perfumes, they are potential allergens and they can be photosensitizing. Modern sensoric can be tricky. So from the dermatologist point of view, we are coming back to this old-fashioned galenic. Emulsions, cream, water-based textures is nothing so funny about it. So we should find a balance in between of these two trends. And also what I find interesting in children and teenagers, let's say human being born in 21st century, they are much more concerned about our planet. So they're really looking for clean technology and sustainability in not only in the packaging. They don't like plastic. And as I hope that no one really loves plastic packaging, but we use it in different ways, be good in trying to be as much sustainable as we can. But children can be quite radical about it. So this is probably the way to develop some dermatologically safe solution, but still appealing to the heart of the generation Alpha. And also it is such an interesting phenomenon, these young creators and very young brand founders. And obviously for most of adult people, I suppose that the first reaction is, oh my God, 12 years old, the brand founder. But I remember myself in this age. I entered the university when I was 15. And when I was 12, I baked the lipstick, which was highly popular in my school. And I spent hours in the library just developing kitchen technology to do it properly. So I suppose it can be done. And it is very interesting. And maybe it is one of the many ways to get children more entrepreneurial and more excited about technology, about the industry, and about chemistry. Chemistry is so interesting. Chemistry and biology, they are closely related. And if we understand the whole complexity of the biological life and how we can address different biological phenomena in our skin, it could be a different world. So if it can make children more excited about chemistry and biology, let it be. It is great. But it is still the challenge for manufacturers, obviously.
And Sam, your brand has always focused on younger skin. How do you decide what products young consumers generally need rather than simply what the market is asking for?
Yes, that's really what I'm focused on. And I think I divorce myself from the marketing. I try and stay away from looking at what's trending and what's the latest ingredient that everyone's interested in, because if you use historical data and proven data, that's really where I think that what's worked in the past works in the future. And there are different ways of delivering it. And there are different grades of ingredients and purities and percentages you can use. And it's about the complexity in formulation, actually, to deliver that same technology, but in a more efficient or efficacious way. I remember when I first started the brand, that was in 2012, there was a huge fuss about paraben esters. Everyone knows them as parabens, and the industry chickened out of drawing a line in the sand and facing it down, and they buckled under consumer pressure. And the pressure was from people who knew nothing about para-hydroxypenzoic acid esters. I think we have only ourselves to blame. And that's where we talk about education. We talk about young brand founders, which is great. And the Society of Cosmetic Scientists ran a program called Scrub Up on Science, where we helped sort of 13 to 16-year-olds develop cosmetic products to try and get more people in our industry. But they don't know anything about cosmetic chemistry, really, when it talks about complex formulations. So if you've got a young brand founder, they are not developing the product. The product is probably being developed, hopefully, by a cosmetic scientist without too much influence from the business owners who are trying to make the money. I see products in that younger age group from some of the brands that Julia has mentioned. They're using hyaluronic acid, but you'll never have as much hyaluronic acid in your skin as you do up until your early 20s. That's when it starts to degrade very slightly. So putting a product with hyaluronic acid on your skin when you're a teenager, it's like putting a hat on a hat. This sort of misunderstanding of cosmetics, I think, is where the problem lies. And our industry only has itself to blame. And I think we could do better there. So when it comes to using ingredients, ignore the scaremongering, ignore the marketing, because I do think that if you stand up for your product and explain your product, you have nothing to hide. Just as short chain paraben esters are a fantastic broad spectrum preservative. You'll do far more damage to your skin if you have unpreserved cosmetics. But if you don't understand what you're doing as a brand founder, then that's where the problem lies. There's brands in France now talking about, we are the first non-endocrine disrupting brand. What does that even mean? That just highlights the ignorance around cosmetic formulation, cosmetic safety, cosmetic legislation, the misunderstanding about dose, concentration, risk, hazard, and how we are changing things around. It's a very frustrating area for cosmetic scientists. And I think if you just stay true to your principles, use the most efficient, effective, proven, safe cosmetic ingredients for the age group or the skin type you're developing for, then you can't go wrong. It's when you try and cash in on trends or the latest thing or the latest fear, that's where the problems lie.
As younger consumers enter the beauty category, regulators, retailers, and parents are all paying closer attention. Questions around marketing, product claims, ingredient safety, and age-appropriate messaging are now increasingly important. Julia, how do you see the market evolving as retailers and brands respond to these changing expectations?
So firstly, I'm going to say, Sam, I'm absolutely going to steal. It's like putting a hat on a hat, because that is fantastic. But yes, back to market and regulatory shifts there. So there's two major areas that I would like to flag here as really facilitating a need for the industry to really almost amend its approaches. So last year, Australia banned social media for under 16s. It was very high profile. It was a first of its kind move. It encompassed TikTok, X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, and Threads. So it was pretty all encompassing. And this saw existing profiles deactivated, and Australians under 16 can no longer set up social media accounts. Apparently, we'll get back to that in a bit. However, under 16s can still, for example, view content on online platforms that don't require an account. And the ban doesn't include online gaming sites like Roblox and Discord. And they're both huge. Discord is massive at the moment and will only continue to grow. So there is, I guess, that caveat as well. As for punishment, infringement won't result in children or their parents being cautioned. It's the social media companies themselves that will face fines for serious or repeated breaches. And the Australian government has asked platform owners to rely on things like age checks, government IDs, face or voice recognition, and age inference, which basically analyzes online behavior and interactions to estimate what a person's age might be. That said, there have been studies and reports from this year which really suggest that implementation has been patchy at best. Some youngsters have been ejected from their accounts, but most have not. So most people under 16 in Australia are still able to access all of these platforms. And in response, very recently, Australia doubled the maximum fine and has warned of court action against tech giants for non-compliance. It's a step in the right direction, but it does need to tighten up if it doesn't want to be particularly toothless. That said, this is not putting off other countries outside of Australia. The UK government, it plans to ban under 16s from accessing TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and X, potentially among other apps, with the government hoping to pass regulation before Christmas, and the ban is due to come into force in spring 2027. And literally today, on the 15th of July, I'm sure you've read the papers, the UK government is proposing an overnight social media curfew for 16 to 17-year-olds, so that the eldest Gen Alphas there. And there are too many countries pursuing similar legislation to list all here, but China has a restrictive minor mode program. The UAE in June, it approved a resolution setting the minimum age for social media use at 15. It's the first Arab country to introduce such a measure. And the EU plans to target addictive and harmful design practices in its Digital Fairness Act, which is a planned law due to be proposed later this year. The US as well has a Kids Online Safety Act in the pipeline, which, if successful, would require social media companies to exercise reasonable care in designing features that contribute harm to minors. So there is so much going on here across the board, across the world, and there's a lot of eyes on Australia at the moment to see how it really tightens this up. I would say as well, obviously that is going to result in some major changes. I think we're going to see brands finding ways to work within this new framework. So shifting from viral feeds into more diverse marketing channels, whether this be the website, email, app, QR-led options, in-person community-led experiences, all of those things that we really did before social media went absolutely wild. On top of the social media side, we've seen something of legislation push in the wake of the Sephora Kids phenomenon. So this was probably most notably in the US. You had Assembly member Alex Lee initially introduced a bill that would have banned kids under 13 from buying anti-aging products. This did not pass. They introduced a new bill to ban kids under 18 from being able to buy the products, which I'm assuming he may have assumed was easier to enforce because of ID, but this was also defeated due to fiscal impacts and enforcement complications. That said, we're seeing developments to hold retailers and brands to account. So in March this year, Italy's competition authority said it was investigating Sephora and Benefit for marketing skincare to children. There's been no update on that, so I imagine that's still ongoing, and I wait with interest to see what the outcome of that is. And then Sephora this year as well introduced new safeguards regarding the marketing of anti-aging skincare products to children. And this was following an investigation by the Connecticut Office of the Attorney General. There might be too many safeguards to list, but these include things like all brands that supply Sephora skincare must provide it with warnings and disclaimers about the suitability of their products for under 13s. All employees who assist consumers must be trained to identify products that may not be suitable for under 13s. And also on the website, there should be clearly disclosed information again about unsuitable products for children under 13. So really, it's all quite logical stuff. So I think what all of this infers, which is interesting, is that it is not just an industry issue that we have to police ourselves. There are concerned parties among our lawmakers, among our marketing authorities, And there are a lot of outsider eyes on the cosmetics industry when it comes to the kind of goods we market to Gen Alpha and also how we market potent skincare generally, whoever the core audience may be, how we market it to ensure that these aren't enticing to teens and tweens in any way.
And Dr. Tiina, do you expect greater regulatory guidance around products aimed at younger consumers? And what areas should the industry be preparing for?
All of the European regulation is already tightening, and Australia, they're doing a lot of things about it. I'm not sure about FDA in the US during the upcoming few years, because who knows what direction it can take. But my question is, how it can be realized? Honestly, we cannot even properly forbid children to buy alcohol. They're still buying it if they really want it, or cigarettes or whatever it is. And I suppose it can be very difficult in the skincare regulation to really control the advertisement addressing children because it's not so objective. If in the advertisements they don't say clearly, oh, children from 8 to 12, go to us, buy our creams. So what can you do? You can say it's appealing for children. The advertiser can say, no, we are addressing young adults. And also, I think that's probably the education. And education from not only from the official representative of the industry, despite it is very important. We should have guidelines, we should have some support of the society and association in our industry, but also I think all of us should take some place in this education. We should speak about the importance of the proper skincare and how we see the proper skincare for children and for teenagers. And I cannot agree with Sam more than obviously the skin cleaning and sun protection, but hyaluronic acid, really? Or retinol? Every time when I hear about children using retinol, their intestine produces so much of retinoic acid. Then even a little bit from the topical application can bring the overdosage of the vitamin A in weeks, if not in days. So it should be regulated, and we need this regulation in place. But also it should be we should be more educating in every place in the industry, from beauticians and dermatologists and aesthetic doctors to people who contact consumer directly, people who are involved in the online digital commerce, obviously in some social media marketing and so on.
Sam, similar question to you. What greater regulation guidance would you like to see around products aimed at younger consumers?
It's very difficult. We've talked about putting age restrictions on products, but that doesn't really work because if you're having cystic acne and you need a topical retinoid, sometimes that can be helpful. So these sort of blanket statements on cosmetic products are tricky. I don't have the answer to these, actually. What I do know is that we are consistently and constantly looking at cosmetic products and formulations and ingredients and improving and examining and re-examining individual ingredients and concentrations and compatibility, and all these things are being reviewed consistently. And I think that is where the answer lies. It's with the industry taking responsibility for the safety of products. But where it comes to stopping a certain age group from using a certain product, I think that's very complicated and very difficult. Just referencing back on age group, specifically teenagers, we do say some things and act differently. So although sustainability seems to be very important, I've had 2 teenagers. They've never recycled, really. I'm the only one that recycles. A lot of their friends smoke disposable vapes. They like to see sustainability and they like to be part of it. But if it doesn't suit their agenda or what they want, that goes out of the window. I don't think we must forget that Of course, we would like to be more sustainable. Of course, we would like to eat better. Of course, we would like to do all these things. But actually, what we say and what we do are two very different things. And it's no different as adults as it is for young people.
And finally, I'd like each of you to look ahead. Julia, what are your top 3 predictions for the future of Gen Alpha beauty consumers?
All right. Knowing both Tiina and Sam's expertise, I wanted to focus on maybe things that I thought they wouldn't focus on. So I'm going to say we know we're going to see a lot more social media crackdowns, necessary social media crackdowns, which limit young people's access to what is essentially our industry's most relied upon method of reaching consumers right now. So as mentioned, we're going to have to find maybe ways to work within this new framework, which is much less reliant on viral feeds and virality and what's trending on TikTok. I think another aspect, which I didn't mention, but I probably should have, is the play aspect within formulation. I think that's really important for Gen Alpha, especially those who in 10 years' time will still be in Gen Alpha, our baby Gen Alphas who are going to be coming up. So I think you've probably been to INCOS recently. You've been around the stands. You've seen what some of the suppliers and some of the distributors are showcasing with what you can do with their products. And all of these amazing textures that will definitely appeal to Gen Alpha: jellies, sticks, crayons, pots, slime-like textures, these transformative products, both texturally and visually. So I can really see that is big right now. It's big with Gen Z, but I can see that really being doubled down on. This is absolutely not for Gen Alpha, but I thought it was a really great example of what you can do that's a bit creative. It's called Thank You Pharma. It's a K-beauty brand. They have a cream, which has the gel cream, the main part, and then the oily component is just separate in the middle, but in the same pot. So you can use your finger in one swipe for more or less oil, depending on your need. And I think the concept of that could be really appealing for something that's fun, personalized, theatrical, would tick a lot of boxes for Gen Alpha. And finally, for me, I think this is maybe for older Gen Alphas and predominantly for maybe girls, but pop-on and peel-off beauty is having a moment among Gen Z with brands like Fazit. And I think it's going to be a really interesting category for Gen Alpha because it feels like a gateway category. Gen Alpha, they might want to experiment with looks. They're not confident with application. It's experimental and bold and temporary. Because here's the thing, the continuing trend for clean beauty, it's very much an older millennial thing. But ironically, it's quite suitable for teens as their first foray into makeup, lip oils, jelly blush. It's all pretty subtle stuff. However, no Gen Alpha is going to want to emulate millennials. We are dinosaurs to them. They want to emulate Gen Z at present. And currently, Gen Z is pivoting to bold and experimental looks, which are likely to be considered wildly unsuitable by their parents of 11 and 12-year-olds. So possibly these stick-on freckles and stick-on eye flicks can be deployed for their first disco as something of a kind of parent-acceptable way for this generation of teens to dabble in that individuality there.
And Dr. Tiina, from a dermatology and skin health perspective, what changes do you expect to see over the next few years?
Oh, I am an incurable optimist. And so I think that's probably the trend for Gen Alpha can be slow beauty. As paradoxically as it can sound, I think that the interest in the skincare can develop on the better understanding of the importance of self-care. And skincare, it is a part of the self-care. And also they are more literate, for example, in the microbiome. They've been born in the era when we started to speak about the microbiome. So for them, it's not such a savage idea. Then we are co-living with our bacteria and viruses and fungi. So I suppose they can use less of disinfectant and harsh skincare products and ingredients with more of understanding of importance to care not about the skin itself, but about the microenvironment, the micro-community living on the skin. And that flow beauty and told them staying and doing, they're two different processes. My youngest daughter, she is 13 years old, but she's autistic, and so she does what she says. And I think I hope that this new generation will develop more consciousness and more mindfulness in every aspect of their life. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but it is helpful.
Nothing wrong with being optimistic. Sam, where do you see the biggest opportunities and perhaps the biggest responsibilities for brands developing products for Generation Alpha?
I think responsibility is the key word there. I think a lot of players coming into this market are seeing it as a money-making business exercise, which is fine. But I think it's the most important and the most complex area of our industry. I think it's the most important because young people are going through the biggest change that you ever go through, I think, growing up, physiologically, emotionally. Your skin changes, you start as a child and you come out as an adult. And it's really important if you are struggling with your skin at that particular age when you are trying to define yourself and you're trying to work out how others are going to respond to you. The outward appearance is really important. You can see that on cultural shows like Love Island and all these things. Our products are front and center in this area. So there's a huge responsibility here to give young people products that are efficacious and can help them, but also say to them, they're only cosmetics. The minute you have a deeper issue, then you must seek medical help. And here's the pathway to that. And I don't think that message is coming across brilliantly. I think a lot of people are saying that their products can solve a lot of issues, which it can help with body odor and greasy hair and oily skin. But actually, if your skin is beginning to affect you and the way you feel about yourself, then you can go to the next step. It just doesn't end with cosmetics. You can go into the medical area. There's a responsibility in our messaging. There's a responsibility on what a cosmetic can do and what it can't do. And I think that gets lost because it's not really a sort of buzzy, exciting social media post. But I do think that I share your optimism, both of you, that this generation coming through are a little bit more cynical about things that they read and see on social media. And they enjoy, as I enjoyed back in the 80s, you wanted the latest pair of Nikes. Nothing changes. Teenagers are exactly the same as we were as teenagers, as my father, as my grandfather. They're going through that same thing. It just happens to be skincare at this moment. And I think that it's coming. I can see it in the younger age group that they are getting better at saying, I like this. It's really trendy. I'll have it. But I know that actually when I get a spot or when I've got body odor, I use that product actually. And I'll have that one on my shelf because it's cool and my friends have it and it's great. But when I need efficacious and when things go slightly wrong, that's where I turn. And so I think that's how the market stands at the moment when it comes to young people and products. But where it comes to responsibility, that's down to the individual brands, and they have to stand up and explain themselves.
And with that, we'll wrap up today's episode of Predictive, Protective, Planet Positive Cosmetics for Gen Alpha. A huge thank you to Julia, Dr. Tiina, and Sam for sharing their insights, and to you for listening. As we've heard today, Gen Alpha represents far more for the next generation of beauty consumers. They're changing how products are developed, how brands communicate, and how the industry thinks about education, responsibility, and long-term consumer relationships. For manufacturers, brands, and retailers, success won't simply be from creating products that appeal to younger audience. It will come from building trust, promoting healthy beauty habits, and ensuring innovation is matched by responsibility. We'll be back next month with more conversations and exploring the focus shaping the future of the global cosmetics and personal care industry. Until then, take care, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.